What happens when a cop who believes he's untouchable meets a woman whose inner strength surpasses the power of the badge he wears? Driving home after a long, exhausting day, Adrienne Wallace unknowingly crosses paths with a man accustomed to holding absolute power, one who isn't used to being questioned. A seemingly minor event is about to spark a tense confrontation, revealing dark secrets and posing a critical question. In whose hands does justice truly lie? It began late on a Thursday night just after 11 p.m., when the streets of Fayetteville, North Carolina, had fallen quiet. Only a few late-shift workers hurried home, and Lieutenant Colonel Adrienne Wallace was calmly driving through town, having just wrapped up a meeting at a military base 2 hours to the south. Adrienne sat behind the wheel of her government-issued black SUV with slightly tinted windows. Nothing flashy, just clean, simple, and reserved, much like herself. As she drove, she hummed softly to the rhythm of the tires rolling steadily along the road, her mind already on getting home. She wasn't speeding, wasn't swerving. She hadn't committed even the smallest mistake. But Sergeant Daniel Mercer saw it differently. At that moment, Mercer was parked near Reynolds Road, sipping cold coffee and scrolling through his phone in boredom, enduring a shift devoid of calls or action. Suddenly, an unfamiliar vehicle passed by. Without a second thought, Mercer tossed aside his coffee, flipped on his patrol lights, and quickly pulled out to follow. Before Adrienne even had time to react, the cruiser was directly behind her. Calmly and deliberately, just as she'd been trained, Adrienne slowed down and gently pulled to the side of the road. In her rear-view mirror, she saw a tall officer approaching, one hand resting on his holster, the other tightly gripping a flashlight. Instead of approaching from the passenger side, as was standard, Mercer came straight to the driver's window. "License and registration," he ordered bluntly, without any greeting. Adrienne kept her hands clearly visible, rolled the window halfway down, and asked politely, "Officer, can I ask why you pulled me over?" Mercer immediately shined the flashlight directly into her eyes. "You were drifting between lanes, didn't signal. Looked like you've been drinking." Adrienne calmly raised an eyebrow. "I haven't been drinking." "License and registration," Mercer repeated. Mercer repeated it louder and more harshly this time. Adrienne didn't argue further. She slowly opened the glove compartment and took out the necessary paperwork. As she handed them over to Mercer, she calmly added, "This is a government vehicle. I'm a federal employee." Mercer glanced quickly at the documents, then smirked slightly. "Military, huh? Doesn't mean you're above the law." Adrienne looked straight at him and evenly replied, "I never said I was." Mercer's tone grew harsher. "Step out of the vehicle." Adrienne blinked, momentarily surprised. "Excuse me?" "I said step out of the car. I'm conducting a sobriety test." Adrienne's jaw tightened slightly, but she maintained her composure. "On what grounds? I've cooperated fully, and I haven't had a drink." "I'd like to know the specific reason," Adrienne continued calmly. Mercer stepped even closer, voice more threatening. "So you're refusing a lawful order now?" Adrienne didn't flinch. "I'm merely asking for a reasonable explanation." Annoyed by her response, Mercer suddenly yanked her door open himself. "Get out of the car." Right at that moment, Adrienne quietly activated her phone camera and began recording. "Just to be clear," she firmly stated, "this conversation is being recorded." Mercer's eyes flicked toward the phone briefly, hesitation flashing across his face, but he refused to back down. "Get out of the vehicle, now!" Adrienne stepped out, standing tall, not aggressive, but resolute. She didn't raise her voice or resist, but her confidence was unmistakable. Even in civilian clothes. For the first time, Mercer studied her closely. A quiet voice whispered inside his mind, "Who exactly am I dealing with here?" But his pride quickly overwhelmed that thought. Mercer made Adrienne walk a straight line beneath the harsh glare of the streetlights, treating her like a weekend drunk driver. Adrienne completed the test flawlessly. No stumbling, no slurred speech, not even a hint of hesitation. Yet Mercer still issued her a ticket. Failure to maintain lane. Adrienne took the ticket without a word, only giving Mercer a calm, meaningful look. Then she got back into her car and drove away. Mercer had no idea that this ticket would soon land them in court and change everything. Sergeant Daniel Mercer's perspective. Mercer wasn't new to the job. 15 years in law enforcement had toughened him. He'd handled everything from street fights to severe car crashes, building a reputation strong enough to make rookies stiffen whenever he walked by. Mercer liked that feeling. He never asked questions. He gave orders. For him, the badge meant absolute authority. Back at the police station, Mercer barely mentioned the traffic stop. He quickly logged it into the record as failure to maintain lane, suspected impairment, no arrest. Then casually dropped his body camera into its charger, leaving the footage untouched for 2 days. In the break room, Mercer joked about the incident with colleagues. "Some woman tried pulling rank on me," he chuckled, speaking to Officer Diaz. "Flashed her government ID like it was supposed to scare me." Diaz frowned. "Wait, she was military?" Mercer shrugged. "Said her name was Wallace." "Adrienne Wallace?" Diaz's expression immediately changed. "Lieutenant Colonel Wallace? She spoke at the academy last year. She's not just military, she's high-ranking, chief of logistics at Fort Bragg, Bronze Star recipient, 2 overseas deployments. She's a big deal." Mercer waved him off dismissively. "I don't care who she is. On the street, the law belongs to me." Still, something in Diaz's tone made Mercer pause for a moment. Yet in the end, he didn't review the footage or reconsider the ticket he'd written. To Mercer, it was finished. But the reality was far different. Adrienne's response. Adrienne was never one to stir up trouble over minor things. She wasn't dramatic or confrontational. After 22 years in uniform, 2 deployments abroad, and countless dangerous situations, she had no patience for petty arguments. But this time was different. She wasn't just thinking about herself. Adrienne thought about every young soldier she'd trained, every civilian she'd witnessed being treated unfairly, every woman, especially every black woman, who had been forced to remain silent to avoid trouble. She wasn't going to stay quiet. The following morning, Adrienne sat in her office at Fort Bragg, staring intently at her computer screen. She had hardly slept, not just because of anger, although she was angry, but because she kept replaying the incident in her head. Mercer's aggressive tone, his hand resting near his gun, how he deliberately tried to provoke her. Adrienne clearly understood how badly things could have gone if she'd lost her composure at that moment. Her aide, Sergeant Daniels, gently knocked on the door. "Everything okay, Colonel?" Adrienne looked up. "Not exactly, but I'm handling it." He stepped inside and quietly closed the door. "I saw the video. You want me to contact the base lawyer?" "Already done," she replied. Daniels hesitated. "Are you sure you want to take this public?" Adrienne leaned back firmly. "I'm not looking for drama. I'm looking for accountability." And she meant every word. She had built her entire career on discipline and integrity. Her rank wasn't just a title, she had earned it. She'd commanded convoys in war zones, coordinated disaster relief, managed soldiers and resources across 4 continents. But none of that mattered to Mercer. To him, she was just another driver who didn't follow orders quickly enough. That's what troubled her most. The ease with which he'd dismissed her. Adrienne took immediate action. She contacted her lawyers, reached out to the Inspector General, attached the video evidence, and filed a formal complaint, letting the facts speak clearly for themselves. By week's end, Mercer's name was officially linked to an investigation. Police department lawyers were notified. Adrienne kept quiet, continued her work, but behind the scenes she was fully prepared. Her lawyer had warned that the traffic stop was more than rude. It might have violated federal law. If necessary, they would take the case to court. Adrienne didn't hesitate. She was ready. The reckoning. Mercer still believed the issue would quietly fade away until an envelope arrived for him. It was thin and unassuming, just a manila folder with his name neatly printed on the front. He opened it casually in the parking lot, expecting another routine piece of paperwork. It wasn't. Inside was a court summons. Plaintiff, Lieutenant Colonel Adrienne Wallace. Charges, unlawful detainment, intimidation, abuse of power. Mercer stared silently at the document, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "No way," he muttered to himself, shaking his head. "This won't stick." But when Mercer stepped back into the police station, the air felt different. Colleagues avoided eye contact. Conversations halted abruptly. His supervisor, Officer Holt, called him in immediately. The door closed behind Mercer, and the blinds were drawn shut. Holt's voice was somber. "We need to talk." Mercer crossed his arms defensively. About what? That woman from the other night? She's playing the victim. Holt fixed him with a serious look. She isn't playing, Dan. Do you have any idea who you stopped? Mercer scoffed dismissively. I don't care who she is. She got pulled over, acted rude, and now she's mad I didn't roll out the red carpet. Holt leaned forward, his voice quiet but firm. She's not just anyone. She's a high-ranking military officer, a decorated war veteran with a spotless record. She has powerful connections, and the entire incident was captured on video. Her phone and your body cam. Mercer remained defiant, shrugging. So what now? We apologize and back down because she has rank? No, Holt said sharply. But we can't pretend this isn't serious. You're heading to court, and when this becomes public, and it will, it's going to blow up. Mercer didn't budge. She wasn't arrested. I didn't lay a finger on her. I followed procedure. You escalated it, Holt countered firmly. You treated her like a criminal before you even knew who she was. For the first time, Mercer found himself without a retort. The court date was set for 3 weeks later. By then, whispers spread through the department, quiet conversations in locker rooms, strange glances in hallways. No one said anything directly to Mercer's face, but he could sense the shift. He was no longer seen as the tough guy. Now he felt weak, and everyone knew it. Meanwhile, back at Fort Bragg, Adrienne prepared too, but differently. She didn't seek out the media or ask for sympathy. Instead, she quietly met with her lawyers. Together, they carefully reviewed the footage again and again, meticulously noting every detail of the encounter. Adrienne remained calm, collected, but fiercely determined. Her lawyer, Delaney Price, sat across from her and spoke plainly. Are you absolutely sure you want to go to court? It's public. It will follow you. Adrienne met her gaze without hesitation. Good, let it. Price paused thoughtfully. Most people would have dropped this by now. I've stayed silent too many times already, Adrienne replied firmly. This isn't just about me. She wasn't after money. What Adrienne sought was accountability, official acknowledgement that power wasn't permission to behave however one wanted. Silence wasn't the only choice. She was fighting not just for herself, but for everyone who'd ever been disrespected, ignored, or pushed around by those hiding behind authority. On the day of the hearing, Adrienne didn't slip quietly into the courtroom. Instead, she walked in wearing her full military uniform, medals, badges, rank prominently displayed. She wanted the jury to see her clearly, not merely as a woman stopped that night, but as someone who'd served her country, obeyed the law, and deserved fairness in return. Mercer was already seated. When he turned and saw her uniform, his usual smug confidence faltered for the first time. Yet, the real challenge was just beginning. The courtroom was packed, not yet with reporters, but with police officers from Mercer's precinct and soldiers from Fort Bragg. Adrienne's colleagues sat quietly in uniform or formal attire, alongside civilians who were still learning the details of the case. To some, it appeared as a traffic stop gone wrong. For Adrienne, it represented something far deeper, a breaking point that had built up for years. Mercer sat stiffly at the defense table, his expression unreadable but tense. His lawyer, Charles Brenner, whispered something to him. Mercer showed no reaction, keeping his eyes fixed on the judge. Then Adrienne was called. She stood, adjusted her collar, and walked confidently to the witness stand, the same calm authority she'd shown leading troops through danger. She didn't rush or falter. Every person in the courtroom watched her. Her medals gleamed, and her bearing demanded respect, not because of the uniform, but because of everything it represented. The judge cleared his throat. Colonel Wallace, thank you for your service. You may begin. Delaney Price stepped forward, composed and prepared. Lieutenant Colonel, could you please describe the events of February 15th? Adrienne spoke clearly. I was driving home from a meeting at the North Carolina National Guard HQ Reserve around 11:17 p.m. when Officer Mercer stopped me. I wasn't swerving. I wasn't impaired. I cooperated fully and asked reasonable questions, but he responded with hostility. Her voice remained steady, factual, devoid of emotional bias. He ordered me out of my car without explanation. When I asked why, he repeated the command louder and more aggressively. That's when I started recording. Price nodded calmly. Did you refuse a direct order? No. Did you resist in any way? No. Did you inform Officer Mercer of your identity and role? Yes. I explained clearly that I was a federal employee driving an official vehicle. The courtroom fell silent. No whispers, no shifting, just the quiet sound of pens jotting notes. Then they played the videos. First, Adrienne's phone recording, clear, powerful, and damaging. Next, Mercer's body camera footage showing his harsh tone, threatening posture, and hand hovering near his gun, despite Adrienne's calm cooperation. The jury didn't need to speak. The shift in their perceptions was palpable. Next came Mercer's lawyer, Charles Brenner, who tried to sound polite but pressed hard. Lieutenant Colonel Wallace, isn't it possible Officer Mercer was simply doing his job? Adrienne didn't hesitate. No. Couldn't he have been genuinely concerned about safety? I was driving safely, sober, and posed no threat. There was no danger. Yet you recorded the stop. Why? Adrienne met his eyes firmly. Because experience has taught me that staying quiet doesn't keep you safe. I needed proof of what happened. Brenner nodded slowly. So you don't think officers should rely on their own judgment during stops? Adrienne's voice was clear and steady. I believe judgment must come with self-control. A badge isn't a license to act however you want. It's a responsibility. Even the judge paused briefly at her words. Then it was Mercer's turn. He didn't testify, instead watching silently as the videos played again, second by second. Every harsh command, every aggressive gesture, every moment he treated Adrienne as less than human was laid bare before the court. The prosecutor asked sharply, Sergeant Mercer, why did you order Lieutenant Colonel Wallace out of her vehicle? Mercer tensed visibly. She seemed suspicious. Did she disobey you? She questioned my orders. Is that against the law? Mercer hesitated. No. Did she yell, threaten, or resist you? No. Then why escalate? Mercer had no answer. Sergeant Mercer, did you know at the time that she was a lieutenant colonel? Not then. And if you had known? Mercer's voice dropped, revealing more than he intended. I might have handled it differently. The courtroom fell silent. There it was, not exactly an apology, but the truth plainly revealed. That night, Mercer hadn't seen Adrienne as a person. He saw only someone who didn't comply fast enough, who didn't show immediate submission. Now, with her rank visible and the entire court watching, everyone understood exactly what had happened. Yet the trial wasn't over. The jury still had to determine a fair outcome. 3 days later, the jury reached their verdict. The courthouse was quieter now, fewer uniforms, fewer observers, just Adrienne, her lawyer, Mercer, and a handful of curious onlookers. Mercer sat rigidly beside his attorney, his expression controlled, but his jaw clenched tightly. Judge Cynthia Morales looked around the courtroom. In the case of Wallace versus Mercer, the jury finds in favor of the plaintiff. Mercer shifted uncomfortably. Adrienne remained perfectly still. The court concludes that Sergeant Mercer violated constitutional rights during an unlawful stop. His actions violated both department policies and basic professional standards. No cheers erupted, no gasps, just the heavy silence of justice served. Mercer's lawyer leaned in, muttering, "We'll appeal," but even he didn't seem convinced. The judge continued, "While no criminal charges will be filed at this time, Sergeant Mercer must pay $35,000 in compensation. This ruling will remain in the public record permanently, and copies will be forwarded to both the Department of Justice and the Fayetteville Police Department for review and policy reform." Adrienne didn't smile, celebrate, or show any outward excitement. She simply gave a single, quiet nod, not to the judge, not to the jury, but to herself. She had achieved exactly what she'd set out to accomplish. After the trial, Mercer stood outside the courthouse, pacing restlessly near the steps. A few local reporters had gathered, not a large crowd, but enough. After the trial, Mercer stood outside the courthouse, pacing restlessly near the steps. A small group of local news reporters had arrived, not a huge crowd, but enough to make him lower his head and shield his face behind a folder as cameras flashed. He stayed silent, made no comment, and drove away without a word. Inside the courthouse, Adrienne paused in the hallway, checking her phone. A simple message appeared. "You won. Case closed." Her lawyer, Delaney, caught up to her. "You could have demanded more money, you know." Adrienne shook her head gently. It was never about the money. Delaney studied her thoughtfully. Do you think this will really make a difference? Adrienne glanced toward the glass doors. I'm not sure, she replied honestly, but maybe next time he stops someone, he'll hesitate. 1 week later, Mercer was suspended while the police conducted an internal review. Rumors spread quickly. Some said he'd be transferred. Others predicted his career was effectively finished. Either way, the protective shield Mercer once enjoyed was shattered, and everyone could see it clearly. At Fort Bragg, Adrienne returned to work as if nothing had happened. She didn't seek praise or interviews. She had tasks to complete, people to train, missions to lead, and duties to fulfill. Still within her team, the message was clear. You don't always have to shout to earn respect. You don't need to crumble to prove you've been hurt. Sometimes remaining calm speaks louder than anger ever could. Even with the court's decision in her favor, Adrienne knew the fight wasn't truly over. Accountability wasn't only about punishment, it was about what happened next. 2 months later, Adrienne stood before a room filled with new recruits at Fort Bragg. Most had only recently put on the uniform, young, eager, ready to serve. This time she wasn't discussing battle plans or logistics. She was talking about leadership, specifically what it meant when no one was watching. She scanned the room. How many of you believe a uniform automatically grants you respect? A few hands rose cautiously, some certain, others hesitant. Adrienne nodded slowly. I understand why you'd think that, but here's the reality. Respect isn't given, it's earned. With every action, every choice you make. She let her words settle before continuing. The same is true for power. The badge, rank, or authority you have, it's not armor. It's a burden. If you can't carry it with honor, you don't deserve it. In the back of the room, a young soldier sat up straighter, listening intently. Adrienne paused briefly, then added, when an officer stopped me and forgot his duty, I had choices. I could have yelled, frozen, or ignored it. She looked directly at them. But I didn't. I recorded it. I reported it. I stood up in court and spoke the truth. A heavy silence filled the room. That officer believed his badge made him invincible until he saw my rank. Not just on my uniform, but in the way I stood my ground. That's the difference. That's what true leadership is. The room remained silent, captivated not by obligation, but by genuine understanding. Adrienne closed her folder and looked out at them. Lead with honesty, serve with honor. Remember, you're not just wearing a uniform. You represent everyone who ever wore it and everyone who ever will. She stepped down from the podium, not seeking praise or gratitude, but satisfied her message had landed. Let this be your lesson. Power without responsibility is merely fear in disguise. Speak up. Stand firm against injustice. Never look away. Silence helps the wrongdoers, but courage defends us all.